All right, so this is lesson 2, and we're talking about multiplying and dividing polynomials. So when you're multiplying polynomials, the coefficients, which are the numbers that are in front, are going to be multiplied, but the powers or the exponents will be added. So let's take a look at an example. If I have 3x squared minus 2x, the coefficient is the number in front. So this 3 is a coefficient and this negative 2 is a coefficient. The power is the exponent. So that's 2. And if there's no exponent that you can see, then 1 is always assumed. So I'm going to multiply the coefficients, but I'm going to add the exponent. So I'm going to put the x down, and then I'm going to add the coefficients. So, the power. So 2 plus 1 is 3. If I classify it by its degree and number of terms, so that's what we did last class, it's going to be a monomial, but the degree is 3, so it's going to be a cubic monomial. All right, let's try another one. Here now you're going to have to distribute. So you're going to take 4 times 4x squared times 3x squared. So I'm going to multiply the coefficients, or the numbers in front, and I'll get 12. But then I'm going to add the exponents, so I would get x to the 4th. Now I'm going to multiply the 4x squared times negative 2. I multiply the coefficients, so 4 times negative 2 will give me a negative 8. I'm going to write the x down, and then I'm going to add the exponents. Remember, there's a 1 on that x. 2 plus 1 is 3. Now I'm going to take the 4x squared and multiply it by the 5. I'm going to multiply the 4 times 5, which would be 20. And there's no other x, so I'm just going to write it down, x squared. If I'm going to classify this by its degree and number of terms, its degree is 4, so that would be quartic, and it has 3 terms, so it'll be a trinomial. So it'll be a quartic trinomial. All right, let's try this one. Now, lots of Algebra 1 teachers will call this foiling or double distributing, but I'm going to multiply the 2 times the 7x to get 14, and then x times x to get x squared. Then I'm going to multiply the outside terms, 2x times 5, and I'll get a 10. And then there's no other x, so I'm just going to put the x on there. Then I'll multiply the inside terms, negative 4 times 7x, for a negative 28. And there's no other x, so I'll just write the x down. And then negative 4 times 5, which will be negative 20. But now I have to look at this and combine any like terms. My middle terms are going to be my like terms. The like terms are terms that have the same exponent. So these both just have x's. So I can combine that for 14x squared minus 18x minus 20. If I'm going to classify this, the degree is 2, so it would be a quadratic, and there are 3 terms, so trinomial. So a quadratic trinomial. Why don't you put the video on pause and do this one yourself and see if you get it right. All right, so we're going to distribute. So you're first going to distribute that 3x to the 2x squared. So I'm going to say 3x to the 2x squared. I'm going to multiply the numbers in front, and I'm going to add the exponents. Then I'm going to multiply the 3x times the negative 3x. So I'm going to get negative 9. X times x would be x squared because I'm adding the exponents. And then I'm going to multiply the 3 by the 4, so I'm going to get 12x. I have to keep now multiplying. I have to multiply the negative 1 times the 2x squared, so I'll get negative 2x squared. The negative 1 times the negative 3x, well, a negative times a negative is a positive, so it'll be positive 3x. and then the negative 1 times the 4 for negative 4. Now I have to look at this and combine any like terms that I see. So I don't have anything else that has a 6x to the third, so I'm just going to write that down. But I have a 9x squared and a negative 2x squared. So negative 9 minus 2 will give me the negative 11x squared. Then I have a 12x and a 3x for my 15x. And then I'm just going to bring that 4 down the end because I have no other numbers to combine with them. So my when I multiply those two polynomials, I'll get 6x to the third minus 11x squared plus 15x minus 4. If I'm going to classify this, the highest degree is 3, so that would be cubic, and it has 4 terms, so it would be a cubic polynomial with 4 terms. All right. Now we're going to use what we know about multiplying polynomials to determine the value of a, b, and c. And these are kind of like a little puzzle. I kind of like these. These are fun. So the first thing you're going to do is exactly what we've been doing. You're going to multiply or distribute that negative 5x squared. But now I'm multiplying 5 times a. So the only thing I can say is that's going to be 5a. And my x times x is going to be x to the 4th. Now I'm going to take this 5x squared and multiply it over here. But 5 times negative 2 is my negative 10. X squared times x to the 1 gives me x to the 3rd. Then I'm going to take my 5x squared and multiply it by b. Well, when I multiply those coefficients, it's just going to be 5b, and there's just an x squared there. But I know that this side of the equation has to equal this side of the equation, so I'm going to set those equal. Well, because I've set them equal, I know the stuff in front of the x to the 4th on both sides of the equation have to be the same. So I know that 5a has to equal 5, otherwise these expressions will not equal each other. So if I know that 5a has to equal 5, I can solve for a, and I know a has to be 1. Now I'm going to take another look at it. The stuff in front of my x to the 3rd, which is negative 10, has to equal the stuff in front of my x to the 3rd here, which is negative c. And remember, I'm going to take the sign with it. So in both of these, I took the negative sign with it. So now I know that negative 10 has to equal negative c. But I want to solve for c, so I'm going to have to divide by negative 1, and I know that c has to equal 10. And then I know the stuff in front of the x squared, which is 5b, has to equal the stuff in front of this x squared, which is 20. So I know that 5b has to equal 20. If I want to solve for b, I'm going to divide by 5, and I know that b is 4. So now I know that a is 1, b is 4, and c is 10. If I substituted those into this expression and multiplied it out, then these two would equal each other. All right, put the video on pause and see if you can give this a try. All right, so the first thing you're going to do is distribute. So I'm going to take this ax and I'm going to multiply it by the 2x squared. So I'm going to multiply the coefficients. So 2 times a is 2a. And x times x squared will be x to the 3rd. Then I'm going to take my ax and multiply it by my bx. So I multiply the coefficients, I get ax, and x times x is x squared. Then I'm going to take my ax and multiply it by negative c. So when I multiply a times c, I just have ac. And then there's no variable there except for the x, so I'm just going to bring him down. Now I know that the left side of the equation has to equal the right side of my equation, so I'm going to set those equal. Now I'm just going to match up terms. I know the stuff in front of my x to the 3rd has to equal the stuff in front of my x to the 3rd on this side of the equation. So therefore I know that 2a has to equal 6, and I can solve this for a, and I know that a is 3. Now I'm going to set the stuff in front of my x squared equal to the stuff in front of my x squared here. So I know that AB has to equal 15. Well, I've already determined that A is 3, so I can substitute 3 in here for my A, and then I can solve for B. So I know that 3B has to equal 15. If I divide by 3, I know B is 5. And last but not least, I know the stuff in front of my X has to equal the stuff in front of my X here. So I know that negative AC has to equal negative 12. But once again, I know that A is 3, so I'm going to substitute 3 in there. Not forgetting my negative sign, though, so I'm going to have negative 3C is negative 12. I'm going to divide both sides by negative 3, and I have C is 4. So now I've solved for A, B, and C. Now we're going to talk about division. So there's two kinds of divisions we're going to talk about. Division when I'm dividing by a monomial. So right here, this is a monomial. It's just one term. So that's the first kind of division we're going to talk about. So when you have this kind of division, when you're dividing by a monomial, in division, you're always going to be dividing the coefficients and subtracting the exponents. So when I was multiplying, I was adding the exponents. Now I'm going to be subtracting the exponents. So when I'm dividing by a monomial, it's easiest if I just take every single term and divide it by that monomial. It's a little bit easier to see it that way. So now I'm going to look at each term and simplify it. Well, 15 divided by 5, I'm going to divide the coefficients, so that'll be 3. And I have x to the 5th divided by x squared, so I'm going to be subtracting my exponents, so that'll be x to the 3rd. On the second term, I'm going to have negative 35 divided by 5, so that'll be negative 7. And when I'm subtracting my exponents, x to the 4th minus x squared will give me x squared. So I'll have negative 7x squared. Now continuing on to the third term, 5 divided by 5 is 1. When I subtract my exponents, 3 minus 2 is 1, so I'm just going to have x to the 1, or simply x. And on the last term, I have negative 25 divided by 5, so that'll give me negative 5. And here, these just cancel out because they both are 2. They're the same in the numerator and the denominator, so I can just cancel them out. So I'm just going to end with a negative 5. Sometimes you'll see the problem written like this. Instead of this one here, they had it where they had the divided by the 5x squared out here. But they can write it this way too. And sometimes that's just as easy to look at it. We can look at it term by term. So 27 divided by 3 is 9. X to the 4th divided by x to the 1 would be x to the 3rd. So you're going to have 9x to the 3rd. Then you're going to look at the next two. 9x to the 3rd divided by 3x. Well, 9 divided by 3 is 3. X to the 3rd divided by x is x squared. So you're going to have plus 3x squared. Then you're going to look at the next two. Negative 3 divided by 3 is negative 1. X squared divided by x will just be simply x to the 1, or x. And if I'm looking at the last two, negative 9 divided by 3 is negative 3, and my x's will cancel out. So when you're dividing by a monomial, you're just going to divide each term individually by that monomial, remembering that you're dividing your coefficients but subtracting the exponents. But sometimes you have to divide by something larger than just a monomial. So here we are now going to be dividing by a binomial. It has 2 terms. And this is going to be division by a simple binomial, which means that there's not going to be a coefficient or a number in front of my x. We're going to use this little bit of magic that's synthetic division. And it's always going to follow the same pattern. Now, you can use long division on polynomials, but that is not something we are going to be getting into in this course. So we are only going to be talking about synthetic division. So in synthetic division, the first thing you do is you set the divisor, or the thing you're dividing by, equal to 0 and solve for the variable. So I'm going to take x plus 1, which is my divisor, and I'm going to set it equal to 0 and solve for x. So x is -1. My next step is I'm going to look at all my coefficients, and I'm going to check to see if I have any missing terms. So what that means is I have an x to the third, an x squared, an x, and no x at all. An easy way to check this is if I have a third degree, I should have 4 terms. If I had a 4th degree, I should have 5 terms. If I had a 6th degree, I should have 7 terms. So I should always have one more term than my degree. And if I didn't, then I'm going to have to put a 0 in for that term, and you'll see that a little bit later. So what you're going to do is you're just going to write down each one of those coefficients, making sure you take the sign with it. So I'm going to make this kind of upside down L, and I'm going to write down all the coefficients. So 4, -2, 2, and 6. I am then going to put that -1 that we found x to equal out on the left side. Now your next step is always, always, always to simply drop the first term. That is what you will always do. So you're going to take that first term, which is 4, and just bring it straight down and write it down. Then the next step is to multiply the two outside numbers. So -1 times 4 is what I will be multiplying. And when I multiply them, I get -4. I'm going to put it underneath my -2. After I've multiplied, I am then going to add those two numbers together. So -2 plus a -4 is a -6. And once I've done that, I'm just going to keep continuing multiplying and adding until I get to the end. So I'm going to take my two outside numbers, now -1 and -6. I'm going to multiply those two together and put it underneath the 2. So -1 times -6 is 6. I put it under the 2, and now I'm going to add 2 plus 6 is 8. I'm now going to multiply. -1 times 8 is -8. I'm going to put it underneath the 6. Now I'm going to add. 6 minus 8 is going to be -2. The numbers that you have before the last number are going to be your coefficients of your answer, but it's always going to be 1 degree down from what you started with. So I started with an x to the third, so that means my answer will be an x squared. So it means I have 4x squared minus 6x plus 8. This -2 is my remainder. So I'm going to say plus -2 over x plus 1. All right, let's try another one. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set x minus 3 equal to 0 and solve it so I know x equals 3. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, I have an x to the third, so I must have 4 terms. 1, 2, 3. Uh-oh, I'm missing a term. So you can see I have an x to the third and x squared, but I don't have just an x. So I'm actually going to have to put in like plus 0x in here because I'm going to have to put a 0 in for that term. So when I write down my terms, I'm going to put -1, 4, but then I have to put a 0 in for that missing x, and then 9. I'm going to do my upside down L, and I'm going to put 3 out front. My first step is always to just bring down the first term. I'm going to bring down the 1, or -1, and now I'm going to multiply the two outside numbers to get -3. I'm going to put that under the 4, and then I'm going to add. So 4 plus or minus 3 is going to be 1. Now I'm just going to continue multiplying and adding until I'm at the end. So I'm going to multiply 3 times 1 to get 3, and then I'm going to add 0 and 3 to get 3. I'm going to multiply my outside numbers, 3 times 3 to get 9, and I'm going to add 9 plus 9 is 18. So remember, my answer is 1 degree down from what I started with. So I started with x to the third. So it's going to be -x squared, because that's 1 down from 3. negative x squared plus x plus 3, and then I'm going to put my remainder over what I divided by, x minus 3. All right, why don't you put the video on pause, and I'll go through this one with you in a moment. All right, so I have x equals negative 4. You're going to put your coefficients down, 3, 2, negative 3, negative 60. I'm going to divide by negative 4. You're going to bring down the 1. You're going to multiply. You're going to add. You're going to multiply. You're going to add. You're going to multiply. And you're going to add. So your answer, once again, is 1 exponent down from what you started with. So I have x squared minus 2x minus 15. And now I have no remainder on this one. All right, if you have any questions, let me know.